Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos. Although, if you don't know who I am by now, what have you been doing for the last 709 episodes? Well, have we got a treat in store for you? Hang on, I'll just check. Oh yes, it says here on this piece of paper that we do, and I can confirm that it's correct because I'm genuinely excited to bring you the conversation you're going to hear in this week's episode and over the next 2 weeks after that, because I've had a wonderful, in-depth, epic conversation with Lindsay Sharman and Laurence Owen. Now, those two need no introduction, but they're going to get one anyway, because here on Musical Talk you will probably know them best as the talents who were in and behind those smash hit Edinburgh musical shows Jekyll vs Hyde, The Time Machine, Cine Musicals and Cine Musicals High, plus many other shows up in Edinburgh, which are not necessarily musicals and therefore fall outside the purview of Musical Talk. But these two are a powerhouse individually and together. And I'm delighted to say they have a new offering, and it's that new offering, the Ballad of Anne and Mary, which we're going to be discussing over the next 3 weeks. But what is the Ballad of Anne and Mary? Well, actually, it's quite a new departure, or so it seems to me, because it is a 5-part free podcast musical and tells the story of Anne Bonny and Mary Read. And if you don't know who they are, you soon will once you've started listening to the podcast. But just to whet your appetites, they are two extremely famous early 18th century female pirates. So, consider your timbers shivered. Now, Laurence and Lindsay are fabulous people. They're hugely talented, but they're also huge fun to be with in terms of company. And I hope that you'll get to hear that in the conversation as you listen to it over the next 3 weeks. This week, we're going to be looking at the development of the Ballad of Anne and Mary. And that includes also talking about how they learnt many of the skills needed to tell a story effectively with music from another podcast which they've created, which is already available, called Mockery Manor. It's not actually a musical, but it does use specially composed songs to tell that story. And so later today in this episode, you'll be able to hear 2 songs from that podcast, Mockery Manor. And then next week we'll be discussing the narrative and the text of the Ballad of Anne and Mary, and then in the 3rd week we'll be talking about the songs. So every episode will feel very, very different. But the linking thread will be that it's all about one new musical that you can listen to now, because the first episode has already been released, and all the remaining episodes will be released weekly over the course of May 2021, and of course they're free to listen to. So this is a free musical that you and I can enjoy. So let's get this show on the road. In just a minute, you'll hear a wonderful piece of pastiche 1980s music by Laurence Owen from the podcast Mockery Manor, which we'll be discussing in the course of this episode, as we chart, and I think that's the appropriate word for pirates, the story of the Ballad of Anne and Mary. And then after that, sit down and enjoy the company of Laurence and Lindsay, as I have. Laurence and Lindsay, this is a very happy reunion for me here on Musical Talk because, in a way, I felt I'd been shortchanged because I didn't get to see you last year in 2020 for all too obvious reasons. But I'm delighted to have you back on Musical Talk for 2021 because I think a year without hearing from Laurence and Lindsay isn't a year worth considering in terms of creativity. So, first of all, how are you both?
We're very well, thank you.
We're very well, yeah.
Very
we're
pleased
all good.
to be here. Sort of here, because we're not in the same room, are we?
Yeah, I was going to say that the here we're in is very much not being able to see each other, but that's very much where we are in 2021 still, I think.
Yes.
But you have got a brand new musical podcast coming out, which we're going to be talking about at length today. Just tell us a little bit about that to whet our appetites, and then we'll tell the full story, I think.
Right, so it's called The Ballad of Anne and Mary. It is a hybrid audio drama and podcast musical, and it's inspired by the lives of the pirates Bonny and Mary Read. It's releasing currently, and it's going to be 5 episodes long.
And this, to me, it seems to be one of the fruits of the pandemic in a strange sense. I don't just mean this project, but the idea of being more versatile in how, or thinking more widely might be a better way of putting it, about how one can present drama and musicals and, all forms of drama, let's be honest. Because I'm sure there are examples out there, but this is the first one that sort of hoved into view in the last year and a half, a musical drama podcast, essentially a 5-part episodic story. How did you alight on that?
Well, we'd already done an audio drama the year before, and that had started as an...
Oh, can I say, by the way, you're hiding your light under a bushel. This is the remarkably well-received, fantastic Mockery Manor. And if you're not going to say it, I will.
Oh, no, I was about to say the absolutely incredible Mockery Manor.
The stellar smash hit, Mockery Manor.
But it really was. It was actually fantastic, and everybody who listened to it gave it complete thumbs up, sometimes grafting on extra thumbs to do so.
And that actually started as an Edinburgh show idea, didn't it?
Yes, well, after the end of 2019, we had the idea, wouldn't it be fun to make an Edinburgh show for 2020 that also had a sort of accompanying podcast where we could do extended tales from the world that we'd created for the show.
Which was going to be a theme park, and did become a theme park.
Yes.
So yeah,
that was your first idea for it, yes.
Yeah, and there's so many stories we could tell. So let's start early and let's start releasing an audio drama. So we did that, and it went really well, and it was really enjoyable. And we realised what you could do with podcasts with audio drama as well. It's a kind of strange, like Laurence said earlier, hybrid between a theatrical medium, but there's also a sort of filmic epicness to it, and there's also the intimacy of headphones where when it's right in your ears like that, you feel like you're with the characters in the room. And we were quite entranced by that, I suppose.
Yes, it sits in an interesting place. It's not it's bigger, it's more detailed and immersive than theatre, but it's not quite as sort of literal as film. So it puts storytelling and actors' performances into a sort of strange space that isn't quite one or the other, and it's very interesting.
And it's cheap as well.
Yes, it is.
Which is quite important when you're a small independent maker of things.
Certainly. The worlds that we're able to build just by using audio rather than trying to represent anything visually. It's so freeing. We can really sort of do anything.
Yeah, we can build an entire theme park. And when it comes to the Ballad of Anne and Mary, I mean, I remember at one point they said there was a dearth of pirate films for quite some time because they said they were too expensive to make. And they never brought in the box office. But then we had Pirates of the Caribbean and everything. And so that turned that on its head. But yeah, we certainly, as this kind of status of our company, as it were, could never make a pirate film.
No.
No, but we could make a pirate musical. That was a big step up from Mockery in terms of the expense and the ambition of it. But it's still a tiny fraction of what even a theatrical version of it would cost.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Well, a soundscape is a damn sight cheaper thing to create than a visual scene, isn't it? So I agree with you, absolutely. But the versatility of, let's be honest, radio, because that's what we're talking about here, I think in real terms as a term for audio drama, it has been discovered, I think, over and over again by every new generation. That this is why radio won't die. On paper, a radio should be a thing of the past. It should have disappeared when it stopped being called wireless because in came film. Well, film was already there and upped its game, and along came became television, and suddenly, it wasn't speech marks needed. And yet, of course, radio is still, I think, one of the greatest mediums, or media, I should say.
People have been predicting the death of radio for generations, haven't they? And it just never seems to happen because people keep inventing slightly different ways of presenting it. And now it's being beamed into your ears, over the internet.
I think because it's been around for so long, it keeps going through stale periods where people aren't pushing it and being ambitious. And then, like you say, people rediscover it. They think they're the first ones to do anything interesting with it. And then it goes through another stale period and then just keeps getting, not reinvented, but, like you say, rediscovered, I think.
Do you know, it's also very strangely a oddly classless thing. There are still people who say, well, we won't have a television in the house. But actually, I've never heard anyone say we don't have a radio in the house. It's sort of accepted that that is the form of mass media that anyone and everyone can have.
It's interesting. I never thought of that, but you're right.
Yeah, although I often think that kind of we won't have a TV in the house is a sort of intellectual snobbery.
I think that, there is a snobbery associated with that.
And weirdly, radio is considered a bit more of a higher art form, while at the same time being really badly paid. And I keep coming back to money, I'm sorry. I'm obsessed with... Although I do think when we shy away from talking about money when it comes to putting on productions, we forget that a lot of people are barred from entry into these different mediums because of the lack of funding and stuff. But that's why we were so pleased when the Arts Council started taking podcasts seriously. That was really exciting.
Well, I think we're in the age of the podcast, aren't we? I mean, as we were saying, the revolutions in radio, the current one is the podcast, and everybody's doing it. I can speak from experience on this. Musical Talk has been, is in some senses, one of the oldest ones still going. We started in 2006. But, when the BBC is pumping out podcasts alongside and affiliated to its own radio programmes, that it's sort of everywhere. And it's not just the BBC, everybody is doing it, including this excellent company, Longcat Media, I gather.
Those chances.
Yeah.
Who the hell are they?
I think you've missed a couple of letters out. Those charmers.
That's it.
Yeah.
Always getting them mixed up.
So I tell you what I'd like to talk about, because I think that to understand the Ballad of Anne and Mary, we probably need to go back to that Edinburgh in 2019, which was the last Edinburgh Festival Fringe which took place, and at which you were performing, the two of you. You're excellent, and I mean that absolutely sincerely, and I'm still loving it. Jekyll versus Hyde. One of those rare shows which I went to see more than once and enjoyed twice as much as seeing it twice would allow. So I'm trying to say twice squared, I think. We spoke then, and indeed I think from our conversation on that occasion, you hinted, or you said that you had an audio plan. There was something coming up, but you didn't give me details. I'm guessing that was Mockery Manor. But can I ask you to roll back to that Edinburgh Festival Fringe of 2019, when the world was still normal in the sense that we understood it to be, and just talk about what did you do then? Because the period between the summer of 2019 and, shall we say, Christmas was the last period of non-COVID space in the world. And you as creatives would have wanted to go on and do things. I'm guessing Mockery Manor was the principal thing. But can I just ask you, what did you do when Edinburgh stopped is the quicker question I should have asked a minute ago.
Well, it's funny. I think we were fortunate compared to a lot of common Edinburgh Fringe performers. We actually decided after 2019 that we weren't going to do the Edinburgh Fringe 2020 quite quickly afterwards.
Sorry, pass me the smelling salts.
I know, it's mad to think, and it was as much of a surprise to us as it would probably be to you, because we've just sort of got into the treadmill of going, well, of course, September rolls round and you start thinking about the next one.
How quickly did we decide that? Because originally it was going to be we were going to do a theme park musical in Edinburgh, weren't
yes, we? Yeah. I think when we were in Edinburgh, we were saying, oh, this making a podcast to go alongside next year's show to do extended stories from the same world would be a great idea.
Oh, also, we were very conscious that there's a weird treadmill with Edinburgh where your entire year revolves around that 1 month.
Yes.
And so everything in between feels like waiting and planning for it. And we wanted to have something in the year itself that had some meat to it, where we're creating things that didn't necessarily all, feed into this 1 month, where your show might not necessarily get performed after that either. You might do a tiny bit of touring, you might go to a few art centres and things, but a lot of the time that's the end of your show, and you've built up to it for a whole year, and then that's it. And we were a bit gutted. We were getting a bit sort of sad about that.
Yes.
So we wanted something that would last.
And I think we sort of landed on the idea of podcasts as being something that is global and permanent in a way that I think you can forget when you're doing the Edinburgh Fringe all the time that the Edinburgh Fringe isn't global and isn't permanent in some ways. I mean, it's global in that a lot of people come to it, but unless you have actually been to the Fringe and seen shows when they are briefly existing there,
yes,
then that's sort of it. There's not really another chance to see them, and I think we wanted
it's like
something...
catching a butterfly, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think we wanted to make something that could reach everyone in the world and could be enjoyed whenever anyone wanted to come and consume it.
I mean, forgive me, I fully understand that idea of actually wanting to create something a bit more permanent with a legacy, and also actually not necessarily always be trapped by a routine. Routines are fine to have, but one should never become controlled by them. And so actually having years off is a very good idea sometimes, and I can't imagine you realise that the world would agree with you so thoroughly that we'd all have a year away from our usual routines. I mean, goodness me, talk about being trendsetters.
I mean, I feel a lot of sympathy for the people that had shows planned for 2020. I mean, so many people. I mean, it was about March when it became clear that, this is not going to happen. And by March, you normally, the thing is written, you're well into making it and possibly even previewing it. So, yeah, it must have been heartbreaking.
Can I say, Laurence, I think that's the sound of a professional speaking, if you don't mind me saying. I think I can say with my hand on my heart, honestly, but I've interviewed a lot of people who said, oh, yes, we started the writing process at the beginning of June. So it's lovely. That would explain why your shows are always so fantastic.
I mean, that's not to say we haven't sort of seated the pants in the last month.
Oh, absolutely.
Up to the
Oh, of
festival.
course. Yeah.
But generally, you have the idea a few months before normally, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we slowly work on it while working on other projects, and then there's a last minute kind of, better polish this up.
Yes, the Time Machine, which was our show in 2017, we did a lot of the work very early on and then went, great, that's done. And then I went and did another project, and then it was sort of basically the third week of July, and I was going, oh no, there's like hours of music to write, and so I ended up doing crazy music right at the
It becomes the time stealing machine. That's right.
I could have done with a time machine.
That just proves how we are with deadlines, actually, doesn't it?
Yeah,
that they need to exist, but there will always be a sense of panic and urgency in that last couple of weeks.
Definitely.
Where we're going, why did we leave it so long?
Now, that's really interesting. So you had actually had a plan to have an Edinburgh for a year at least, to then concentrate on other things. And that thing was Mockery Manor, which at the time had originally started off as, if you like, this adjunct to another show. And then the show gets jettisoned and you're left with the extra, as it were, to become the main feature. So this is presumably working through your creative juices, if you pardon the expression, around autumn and the later part of 2019. Was that all you had on your... Not, that sounds terribly glib, but what I mean is, you wanted to do other things. So what did you have on the table before you?
Well, we always want to do our own project, don't we? But we always have to balance it with whatever else we're doing as well. So that includes loads of little composing projects for you, doesn't it, Laurence?
Yes, I'm a sort of gun for hire from a composing point of view. So I'm always doing lots of small projects. But it did quickly take over Mockery Manor. We did realise that this is so satisfying and so much fun and so rewarding to make, and it was getting a very nice reaction. In the sort of the start of 2020, decided, okay, maybe this is actually worth formalising into a sort of a new company, as it were.
Yeah, because I was doing a master's at the UEA in scriptwriting at the time. And
wise choice, by the way. I can recommend the University of East Anglia very thoroughly.
Yes. Yeah, well, they really helped us, actually, because in the first week of January, I realised the business school, they had a thing called the entrepreneurial scheme or something like that, and they had funds available for new companies. And and they were running a kind of week-long is your idea feasible as a business kind of course. And so I went along thinking it was going to be awful, and actually it was incredibly helpful, and it forced me to do a load of research into the podcast industry, and I realised that we could feasibly make a company that could one day make some actual money. And that this wasn't just for our own gratification to keep creating our own projects, that this could actually support us one day. So from then we started thinking...
Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but that is a development in itself, isn't it? Actually, it's sort of... I mean, you were LOLS previously, weren't you? That was the name of your sort of company. But that was almost more of a branding, wasn't it? Rather than a company per se.
Yeah.
Whereas Longcat is more, a media company.
Yeah, well, I think we changed from LOLS, so Laurence, Owen, Lindsay, Sharman, because it sounded ridiculous.
We realised every time we were telling everyone, what the name of our so-called company was, we go, so it's LOL's Production, and it's called that because our initials are LO and LS, and it's very funny, you see. And then we became slightly embarrassed by having to repeat that every time, so we thought, actually, maybe let's make something that's a bit more...
It just made us sound like idiots, like glib and sort of, and like the only thing that we were doing was comedy as well, and that's not
yes, it can be narrowing,
can't
it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then we were like, we want to be taken seriously. Let's call ourselves Long Cat.
Well, the name Long Cat Media comes from a quote which is often, it's one of those quotes that may or may not have ever been said, but it's often attributed to Einstein. I think this is probably nonsense, but the quote that floats around is that he's explaining the telegraph, and he says if you you have to think of it as a very long cat, and if you pull his tail in New York, he will meow in Los Angeles.
It's not one of his better theories.
No, I don't know. I don't know that it's necessarily accurate. And he says the difference between telegraph and radio is that there is no cat. It's one of those things that sort of like you go,
well, that clears that up.
You go, that's very wise until you think about it for a second. You go, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was he taking the piss?
But anyway, we thought the idea of this really long cat was quite funny. So
reaching around the world, meowing at everyone.
Well, I didn't know the quotation at all, even if it's an apocryphal one. But a long cat sticks in the memory, though, so it has a kind of hook, which is also quite good.
Yeah, it's nice and visual.
Yes.
Also, we're obsessed with our cats.
Yeah,
so
we are.
They've been in every production so far, haven't they?
Have they? Yeah. Right.
Well,
See, they sounded like humans when I was listening to them.
I know, it's incredible, and they're very underpaid as well.
It sounds like what you were doing is solidifying all the things which had always really actually been in your working relationship, as well as your personal relationship, into something that was now a proper foundation rather than a treadmill. And that was two-sided. There was the business element of it, which one must never forget. Show business is a business. You've got to be able to buy dinner at the end of the day.
Yes.
But also your creativity could be poured into that business venture, as it were, hopefully to sort of create something wonderful out of it, which I can guarantee, by the way, that you've done, because I've heard the first episode of The Ballad of Anne and Mary. But you were still in Mockery Manor time at that time, weren't you? That you were concentrating on that still in late 2019. Or were you also working on other things? Was there enough space, I suppose?
I don't think we did have enough space, did we, to juggle everything? Because I was doing a master's at the same time. You were working for various people at the same time.
Yes, and we were doing our best to release Mockery Manor episodes as often as we could, which at the time was one a month, which is very difficult for people to keep a continuous story in their heads.
So it was a multi-threaded mystery, so
certainly the more episodes came out, the more comfortable I felt about people actually having a clue what's going on.
Let's talk briefly about Mockery Manor. I think we ought to take a little byway. Tell us just a little bit more about that. You said a theme park mystery, without giving anything away, because I believe it's still available, isn't it?
It is,
oh,
yes.
Yes.
So long tail.
So, lure me in, as though I didn't know about it.
Well, it's an 11-part mystery thriller set in a theme park in 1980s Britain. It's a fictitious theme park, and it could be anywhere in Britain, but it's one of those sort of slightly odd, creepy British theme parks that you think, how did this ever quite get built? It's definitely,
like all of them.
It's definitely not the one in Staffordshire with a big house in the middle of it. It's definitely not that one.
It's a bit more rusting.
Yes.
Can I just say, I've been to many in East Anglia, actually. The East Anglian coast is wonderful, but if you want to take your life in your hands, you can find many a roller coaster that is still surprised to learn that King George VI is dead. They are old.
Yeah, we have we regularly, sort of regularly, go on the oldest roller coaster in the UK because it's at the Pleasure Beach in Great Yarmouth.
Yes.
I think that was the one I was probably thinking of.
Yeah, it's so old it still has to have a bloke in the middle cranking a brake in case you fly off the edge.
Well, yes, it's all run on elastic bands and gas.
Yes.
Yeah, so we wanted to go for that kind of... and we put it in 1989 as well because health and safety was a little bit lax then, I think.
And the nice thing about setting it in the 80s as well is that we could populate the sort of world that these teenage characters are inhabiting with a load of fictitious pop stars and pop songs. So I got to make a load of songs in a classic 80s style, which I really enjoy.
So basically, this is also, now that's what I call not quite 1989, but it sounds a lot like it.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
So, but once again, it's this wonderful idea, isn't it, of a drama with music.
Yeah, well, actually, we often start from the music as a way to spark an idea. So I normally say to Laurence, what kind of music do you fancy writing? and then we go from there. And then I find an idea that fits it.
That's actually very accurate. I think with every one of our previous shows, that's sort of been the launching point is you asking me what kind of music do I fancy writing.
Yeah, because I think for Anne and Mary, you'd start to get into folky stuff, was it?
Yeah, well, I've always enjoyed folk music and the sort of rougher end of it. Because there's a big difference between, I guess, sort of on one end you've got like Enya, and then at the other end you've got sort of Nick Cave, and there's everything in between. And I like the sort of rougher end of it. And it felt like Pirates were a good fit for the rougher end of folk.
Yeah, and something that could also bring in quite a lot of filmic music as well, wasn't it?
We like making things that are on a grander scale than they have any right to be for a two-person company operating from a shed.
Oh, you say this, but I don't think there should be any limits on your ambition, and I'm delighted so far that you've said to yourselves, nope, nothing's going to stop us. In fact, I'm going to quote a line... you're going to drink, screw and fight.
Oh, yes.
I don't mean that literally. I'm talking that... well, you may do. But I mean it figuratively, as in the sense of, you're going to push the boundaries as far as you can.
It's better than live, laugh, love, isn't it?
Yeah. I would have a thing on my wall.
Do let Mr. Sondheim know. So... we're still on Mockery Manor, and Mockery Manor, as you say, 11 parts. But what did you learn from Mockery Manor, which you have carried into Anne and Mary, and presumably other similar radio, podcast things that you have in store?
Well, I suppose from a writing point of view, I had to figure out how to create quite extensive worlds without it being really exposition heavy, because I didn't want to have the narrator going, here we are in such and such place, and what you can see is X, Y and Z, and here's the character, and this is exactly what they're like. Because I think that's a bit of I mean, it's fine. You can. I have nothing against anyone who uses a narrator.
It can be clumsy, though, can't it?
Yeah. It just feels too easy, and why make things easy, eh?
Yeah. On the other hand, it's still more sophisticated than I'm going to shoot you with this gun in my hand.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of very clunky radio drama, and I wonder whether it's maybe that's part of the reason it's not always considered the coolest medium. Yeah.
'Cause a lot of the stuff we listen to in the car, we're kind of hooting derisively and going, why have they done that? Why couldn't they just do...
Well, the old classic is the, hello, darling, what's that under your arm? Is that today's newspaper? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just reading about today's plot.
Yes.
Yeah. And the sound design is often... very clunky, and everyone sighs. Everyone's been directed in a way where they all sigh so much.
Yes.
I think you'll find that's the Archers.
Yeah, just gusty sighs everywhere. So,
size doesn't matter. Thank you.
I think we just maybe there's always, I think, when you do a venture of your own, there's always a small degree of arrogance, I suppose, isn't it? A kind of, we can do this better, so let's do it.
I think there has to be, yeah.
Yeah. I think you've got to be overconfident. Then you've got to get into the weeds of it and go, oh God, this is really hard. What are we doing?
Yeah.
And then you've got to fight through that to the other side.
However, I think it's great that people such as yourselves are finding your own way through the grammar, shall we say, of audio drama. Because actually, just to borrow it from somebody else falls into somebody else's traps. No, you may fall into new traps. There's always fashions in the way drama works. We've said so ourselves, and periods of stagnation and periods of growth. So to come into it now, rather than coming into it 5 years ago, you're producing a different kind of show, shall we say, to what you would have done. I know it's not a very profound thing to have observed that, but I think it's right that you're finding the Lindsay and Laurence way and not saying, OK, let's knock off the BBC way, which is not to criticise the BBC, but obviously they're doing something different and they're a bigger organisation, I've noticed. So,
yeah, I think our experience, we couldn't have done any of this without having quite extensive experience. Or like you say, we would have looked at other shows and tried to do a sort of form of that rather than just going, no, we know what our voice is like, we know what we enjoy doing, let's just do that and just adapt it to the medium.
Yeah.
So having done musicals before in Edinburgh obviously helped. And having written as a stand-up and also as a character comic really helped. And I think that's given us something that, like you say, does fit into the rest of our back catalogue quite neatly. Like it's identifiably us.
Yes.
Yes, and I can see that throughput, by the way. There is a silver thread of Laurence and Lindsay-ness, to use the sophisticated term, all the way through that, what I saw years ago now, actually, your cine musicals originally, Laurence, all the way through your sort of Time Machine and now your audio podcasts. There's a delightful flavour of you both, if that makes sense, which I find very appealing, which is why I'm always coming back, by the way. So.
Well, they always say find your voice, don't they? In the industry, they're always like, find your voice, make your voice unique, blah, blah, blah. And then when you end up working for other people, they're like, forget your voice.
Yes.
You have to adapt your voice to
there is a house
the house
voice.
style. Yeah, this is the house voice. So I think that's a lot of the time why we make our own stuff, because we don't necessarily want to spend our entire working lives adapting to other people's visions. It's nice to get to explore your own ideas.
Oh, absolutely. If you are your own company, you should be your own voice. Yes, I mean, that would be ridiculous to be anything else, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that would be endgaming it, going, I think, we're forming this company because we want to sell this product to whatever large production house or something, or, we're going to sell this to BBC Sounds or whatever. Whereas we're not doing that. We're actually making these things exactly how we want to do them.
So this is bespoke radio, in fact.
Yeah.
It kind of is, and I think the nice thing about podcasts is that there is no one regulating it. There is no one saying, "Oh, you can't do that." And I don't, I just mean that from a perspective of people will tell you, "Oh, you can't do that on radio. That's not possible to do on radio." And I just don't really think that there's very much that you can't do. Having now made a couple of series with some really quite crazy visual elements depicted in sound, I think I'm not particularly intimidated by anything that Lindsay throws at me in the script.
Yeah, we pushed it as far as we could with Mockery to see what we were capable of. Like in the I won't give too much away, but in the final episode, there is a fight on a moving roller coaster.
Fantastic.
And that took a long time to beat into shape.
Yes.
But I think it works really well, and I'm really pleased we did something that was so action-packed in a non-visual medium.
It couldn't be less radio-y. And I like that we've sort of obstinately gone, no, we're going to do this in radio.
Yeah, because I knew if I gave a radio script to someone that had a fight on a roller coaster, and said, "Can you, do you want to buy this?" They'd be like, "No, of course not. You have a fight on a roller coaster. How the hell are we supposed to do that?
Can't it be in a living room?"
Yeah.
How about a genteel chat in a living room instead?
Well, the tension is when the biscuit breaks.
Yeah.
But I like that. But I'd like to explore Mockery Manor a little bit more. So I'd quite like to explore then the relationship between Mockery Manor as a drama, as a suspense mystery, with the music. So, and interestingly, as you said, that the music sort of, or at least the genre of the music, came first. How have you married it up? Because Mockery Manor does not present itself as a musical, but it's certainly a drama with music, isn't it? So what is the relationship between the songs and what's going on?
So the rule with Mockery Manor is that, yes, it's full of songs, but all the songs that you hear are diegetic, which means that they are songs that are being literally played in the environment that you hear them in.
The characters can hear them.
Exactly, yes. So
they'll put the radio on.
Either the radio's on, or there's a parade happening in the theme park, and the cheesy parade music is what you are hearing. Or sometimes the older characters will be playing a shellac record in the background, and so you'll hear a scratchy old kind of sort of 78 or something. That was always the goal going in, was that it's not a musical, but there are loads of songs.
It's a great shorthand for telling the audience where you are in the theme park as well.
Yes.
It's part of the soundscape, isn't it?
Yeah,
So it is.
and rather than having to do a load of kind of tricksy exposition where you say, and now we're walking into Fantasyland. We establish what the lands are, what different music goes in each land in the first episode, and then in subsequent episodes you don't have to explain it again because you just hear the music and you know exactly where they are.
Yes, I can see how that could absolutely work. Just simply in a kind of Scooby-Doo world. If I close my eyes whilst listening to a Scooby-Doo episode set in a theme park, because there was a famous one with Charlie the android, you can sort of work out from just listening that they've moved from the cotton candy stall, as they would call it, to the ghost train.
Well, exactly,
because
yeah.
the background sounds and the music and what we associate in general terms with, what comes out of different funfair attractions. Yes, it's an audio navigator, isn't it?
Definitely,
yes.
and from everything from, like you say, sort of travelling fun fairs all the way through to the sort of really immersive Disney parks and things like that. The music is such a huge part of the whole experience, and if you walk around and actually pay close attention to all the music you're hearing, it's kind of a bit of a cacophony because you're normally hearing several bits of music at once in the park itself, and people. So it's a very, very rich sound world, and so to create something like that, to create the idea of a theme park, really, we found quickly that the best way to make it sound like a theme park is to just play two bits of music almost simultaneously with a lot of sort of spatial reverb, so that it sounds like it's playing from different places.
It also helped with characterization. So we had two generations in the park. We had the teenagers and the older generation who we decided were about 50, 60, and so their teenagerhood would have been, the sort of
wartime
40s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we played their teenage music for the older generation, and the teenagers were enjoying the teenage music of 1989. Oh, and different characters liked different things, like Betty, who was a bit angsty, liked the sort of Morrissey Light song that you did.
Yeah, we made various different pop songs. We made so Betty was a bit of a I guess you'd call her an emo.
Just a pain in the ass.
Yeah, sulky 80s teen. So she listens to a fictitious band called Foucault's Pendulum, who are pretty much Joy Division. And so I wrote a song called Leave This Place Behind Me, which has a sort of droning kind of gloomy voiced Ian Curtisy singing. And I tried to match the production style of those sort of 80s gloomy indie bands as closely as I could. But then, the sort of slightly more cheerful characters listened to Lydia, who is essentially Kylie. And so I made a kind of I Should Be So Lucky era Kylie track called Love Wolf, which is attributed to the fictitious pop star Lydia.
They were also used as kind of red herrings as well, because we had one listener who would contact us and be like, I think it's going to be werewolves, isn't it? It's werewolves is going to be...
I see, because of the clue, I see.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I'd be like, well, maybe it is, but it's not.
Yeah.
And now let's play a song called Axe Murderer.
Yeah.
But ages, I think Love Wolf really confused people. Because for ages, people thought it's definitely supernatural. There's definitely something supernatural. There's nothing supernatural.
The bigger clue was actually in, is it a memory or is it a dream? Which was one of the older generation characters.
That was Jenkins.
Jenkins was playing that, but Margot was. It was always in Margot's kind of realm, wasn't it?
Yes.
So the Manor House would play the shellac records, of one of which was this: is it a memory or is it a dream?
Yeah. Are you a memory or are you
fun time?
Yes.
Yeah,
are you a memory or are you a dream? Is like a sort of Ray Noble. Big band kind of 1940s Al Bowley style crooner, early jazz.
Has to be
record.
early 1940s for Al Bowley.
Yeah,
yes,
well,
I take your point.
Yeah, more 30s for Al
He died in the Blitz, didn't he?
He died in the Blitz in the most wartimey fashion imaginable. It's sort of horrific, but also I couldn't have imagined he would have died any other way.
He'd have probably preferred it not to, though.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably would have preferred not to have died in the Blitz.
This is too appropriate for his last words.
But it's important to remember that in British terms, Al Bowley was our 1930s to about 1941 Frank Sinatra. I mean, he was the big singer.
He was massive, wasn't he? Yeah.
By the way, thank you so much for your Ray Noble, Al Bowley references. You've made a middle-aged man very happy, because that's absolutely where my interests are. So let's just briefly then find it. Staying for a few more minutes on the music of Mockery Manor, you were talking about the richness of sound and obviously the variety and also the sense of sending things up. Not sending things up, but pastiching, perhaps. There's a lot of fun in that. But to get those soundscaping audio feel to the things that you're trying to do, whether it be incidental music or whether it be let me ask, was there incidental music?
There was a sort of John Carpenter-ish 1980s horror synth score that ran through the entire thing, which was the only music that the characters were not hearing. We were hearing the film score, essentially.
That was another reason for setting it in the 80s, actually, because all those teenage slasher films happened then.
They have this wonderful scores that were often made by just one person on their own with a budget of next to nothing, mucking around with a load of clunky old analog synths, and that's it's just a beautiful sound world.
Yeah, the low budget kind of nature of it really appealed to us, didn't it? So, yeah, it's kind of what we're doing, having to do literally everything ourselves.
Yes,
because John Carpenter wrote the music.
Yes, John Carpenter would write his own film scores a lot of the time.
Would he now?
Yes.
That's interesting.
So Halloween, the first Halloween film, was made on a budget of, I think, $50,000 or something absurdly low. And almost all of that went on hiring Donald Pleasance, apparently.
What about Jamie Lee Curtis? Because they must have picked her because of her Hollywood pedigree.
Yes, but that was, I think, her breakthrough role. She was not.
Yes.
She was not particularly well known before that. So, yeah, the big expense was Donald Pleasance. And all other corners were cut, including having John Carpenter himself make the score. And it's so clearly like a bedroom recording, or the equivalent of a bedroom recording. Like the famous piano. I mean, he keeps getting notes wrong in it, and it's like, oh God, I haven't got time. It's fine, leave it in.
But in a horror movie, getting something wrong is a sign of disquiet.
Yes, exactly.
You could actually argue that it's all very cleverly intertextual.
Yeah, you don't want it too perfect, do you? You want to
No.
be unsettled by the wrong notes.
And so the orchestrations that you've adopted for this period, whether it be incidental music or the songs, how easy was it? Because it seems to me Laurence, you're incredibly talented when it comes to songs. You're both incredibly talented, but when it comes to songs, Laurence, you excel, I think, because you're so good at taking different styles and making them work in the way that you need them to work for the narrative you're telling. But I know what an 80s pop song from about 1988, 89 sounds like, because I was there. But if you asked me to sort of come up to identify why it sounds like an 80s song, I couldn't do that.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? I do a lot of listening, and I'm totally incapable of listening to any music now without going, how could I make that?
You got obsessed with synths, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. In this particular instance, I got really obsessed with analog synths because they are just the sound of those 80s film scores, but also the sound of a lot of pop music of the time, and a lot of pop music now. They're really coming back, and they just sound gorgeous. They've got a real warmth to them, and they're sort of their limitations are what make them great. And that was the jumping off point for all of the music of Mockery Manor was kind of what synths can we use?
Very particular way of singing as well, isn't it? So,
80s songs, yeah. The 80s singers have this sort of thrusting style, like which you don't really get these days.
And really talented, like their range is incredible, isn't it?
Take On Me is what always springs to mind. Aha, when it's sort of like a 3 or 4 octave range within the one song, and it's a karaoke classic that people always launch into with tremendous confidence, and then go, I forgot about this bit where he goes.
I'm not Emar Sumac.
And there's a
I
real
can't do this.
theatricalness to 80s music.
Yeah, I'd say Morton Harkett is the Emar Sumac of the 80s.
It was fun doing the research though, wasn't it? Like listening to these things and
Yeah, and I really love pastiching from a musical point of view. A lot of composers hate it, but I think it's really interesting and fun. And like you say, Thos, it is a really great shorthand for getting you to a time and place really quickly.
Well, also, you're in terribly good company, because I'm afraid I'm going to do my obligatory let's shoehorn Gilbert and Sullivan into this, just briefly at least, by saying... and it's often lost now because people don't have the handle on classical music, to use a broad term, that they did at the time. But many of Sullivan's, particularly earlier scores with Gilbert, are applauded at the time because they're very clever pastiches of other great composers. And the most obvious one, which I think you can still pick out today, is a lot of Princess Ida sounds like Handel.
Yes.
Most listeners wouldn't necessarily pick these up, and certainly there's a lot that I don't draw, and I'm a fan. But yeah, I think there's a place for good pastiche, and there always has been. And it isn't any less a sign of great creativity, I think, actually. People who, once we spoke about intellectual snobbery earlier on, but there is a kind of intellectual snobbery that if you're merely pastiching somebody, you're not really creating anything, and that's absolute balderdash. What you are is you're immersing yourself in a set of genre and fashions which are no longer currently current. Doesn't mean that what you're creating in them is any less important than it was if you'd done it in 1989 or whatever.
That's a really nice way of looking at it.
And I think people think it comes from a cynical or a place or a place where there's no affection, but actually I think whenever you do these things, you really genuinely like the music, don't you? And you want to honour it.
It comes from a place of tremendous affection, yeah. And I've even with Time Machine a few years ago, that was very much in the Bernard Herrmann world. You know, I listened to all sort of Psycho and Vertigo and The Day the Earth Stood Still and these scores, which are kind of, they're dated. They are quite dated and they're very hammy, but they're so evocative, and it just tells you what kind of tone we're going for our story. You know, whenever you hear those things, you understand what this is.
It's learning, isn't it? It's learning from everyone else who has been in the industry, and it's this. If you put everything you love and you respect and admire into a big pot, you will eventually come out with your own voice as well. It's not like you can't have your own voice while potentially borrowing or honouring another composer.
Honouring, that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, I think it is,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I agree with that, absolutely. I like the pot idea, by the way, that you've put in somebody else's ingredients, but you've added a few of your own, which means that the syllabub or whatever it is that's going to come out of it will have their flavours and yours. While we're talking, I'm just going to say I think Bernard Herrmann is still one of the greatest film score composers ever. Oh. And I can listen to his scores straight through and just find them exotic and I couldn't work out if I wanted to say exotic or erotic, but I realised I wanted to say neither.
I mean,
they're just marvellous.
I think they're pretty erotic. I think they're great. I mean, to any career that started with Citizen Kane and ended with Taxi Driver is a pretty extraordinary career. But the diversity,
and has Hitchcock all the way.
Yeah, and the sheer range of things that he does in his scores. I mean, he's another pasticher, I think, in even himself. Because no two really sound alike. He's got a kind of musical fingerprint, but they're very, very different, all of them. And I think the thing that has really stuck from his music is the use of strings for horror. I mean, you know, so everyone knows the Psycho stab, but that entire score, I think maybe even again for budgetary reasons, it's just pure strings. There's no other instruments. It's just a small string orchestra. And he just really goes, all right, and just uses every possible sound that those strings can make in a variety of unexpected ways, and it's genius.
Well, it is actually, isn't it? Because just briefly, when you think about it, when people think about violin sounds in an orchestra, the word that people often push up is lush. You know, the Mantovani sound, if we're going to talk 60s. And that's a very 60s sound, Mantovani. Yes. You know, they're lush, the marvellous strings, the lush strings of Mantovani. And yet, Bernard Herrmann is using those strings for intensity. Now, of course, that's been done before, but actually, if you were to ask me what is the goodest, listen to me, ask me what the best example of an intense string sound would be, I think I would probably go to Bernard Herrmann and Psycho. Definitely. And as you say, not just the shower scene, but actually so much of it. There's a lot of very powerful, intense, encased music when we see Janet Leigh in her car.
Yes, the prologue, isn't it?
Why would you have incidental music very much in a when someone's just driving down a motorway? But actually, that music is telling you everything about who she is, and there's not a word being spoken. It's magnificent.
It's really aggressive, which I like. It's sort of really making itself known.
So let me ask the question back in a strange way. We've been talking about how the songs work within the narrative, but Lindsay, how does the narrative incorporate songs? I mean, I appreciate they're diegetic in Mockery Manor, but you've got to find the right nexus points. You've got to find the right place where it works. You've also got to tailor your narrative. So often in any form of musical, and I'm using the word in the most general sense, a song does something which it's better to do in a song, even if it's set in atmosphere, than it is by words. But as the person essentially controlling the narrative, how easy was it for you to sort of make that work?
Well, it certainly helps that we live together, I think, because it means you end up having endless meetings about how the two things come together. So
coffee, yeah.
It's just, we're kind of never off really in that respect, are we? But it means our collaboration is just intensely intertwined, I suppose.
There's a lovely sentence.
Yeah, for sure.
And actually,
but it works. It works. The sausage comes out of the machine, as it were.
Yeah, and
in the nicest possible way, filthy-minded young people.
We should have called our company Sausage Makers.
The sausage in the machine, like the ghost in the machine.
Or there is the machine, the sausage. And
Oh my God!
maybe
no,
it's the
it's
ghost
not-
in the
Oh, no.
sausage casing.
The philosophy of Long Cat Media.
Yeah.
It's a book waiting to be
Yeah,
written.
we're not stoned
It's all
enough for this
sausage
conversation
based.
yet.
Yeah. What the hell was I saying?
I can't remember.
If you don't mind me saying, you're putting the offal into waffle.
Yes, there we go.
I think right from the beginning. Actually, I suppose to start even further back, I'm not particularly musical at all.
Before the beginning.
Before the beginning, there was no light, and then there was light. But Laurence has taught me a lot about how music works in various mediums. So it's been a learning process for me about, such and such amount of time has gone by and we haven't had a song. Let me go and chat to Laurence about how we structure this bit and stuff like that. Yeah, and so I've been teaching myself about how musicals basically work in a structural way. But then when it comes to forming the songs themselves, I tend to write the story of the song, which means I'll say it's this character, this is the point of the song, this is the starting point A and the ending point B, and maybe here's a bit of imagery, here's the tone, is it happy, is it thoughtful, what all that kind of stuff, and then I'll give that to Laurence and he'll do his magic, really. And then, although you run the lyrics by me first, don't you?
Yeah, there's a few sort of stages of back and forth. Once you've given me a sort of prose version of what you want the song to be, and is it an I want song? Is it a musical scene? What exactly is this?
Yeah, why is it being sung?
Yes, yeah. So I'll
What's the emotional driving force? All this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I will then go and crunch it into something that looks like verse, first of all, and then I will do some rough music, and we're kind of constantly going back and forth all the way through this process.
Yeah, and then it's what do you think of this?
No silos at all then, in fact. Actually, you are very, very collaborative, even though the body of the music comes from Laurence and the body of the narrative comes from you, Lindsay. Between the two of you, you're constantly feeding into each other all the way through. So actually, it is a collective and collaborative effort from first to last.
Well, I think it helps keep a consistent tone in that respect. So it doesn't feel like, the music started and it's wildly different to the to the scene without music at this point. So in that way, actually Anne and Mary has been more collaborative than anything we've ever done before.
Yeah.
Well, funnily enough, not all the songs in that are diegetic, are they? So, and it's where a song is diegetic, as you say, you turn on the radio and a song is playing, it can have the voice of whoever the character is that's singing that, i.e. the singer. Whereas in Anne and Mary, there are various songs, and we'll talk about this later, which are non-diegetic. They are being sung by the characters themselves, which means that the songs have to be in the same voice of the character as the narrative elements of that character. And you often hear that not working in slightly less well-formed drama. I mean, Edinburgh is a good example. You can see shows which are great shows, but you can tell that someone has come in with the songs and sort of stapled them in, if that makes sense. They aren't necessarily being sung with the same voice as that character was using when they were talking earlier on.
Yeah, exactly. So that I think that's why it helps so much for us to be constantly collaborating. And I don't know how that it would work if we weren't sort of working on it like that together.
I can't see. I mean, clearly it does work for people, but I find it staggering to think that it could be done any other way. I find it particularly staggering when I hear composers say, I wrote all the music and then I did the lyrics. Like, how did you know what to do? Like, I don't know how you could do it that way, unless I have the lyrics that I've sort of written already with a kind of rough tune in my head as I'm going through them. I don't know how you could possibly write music, because I think about every single phrase what the music wants to be doing to reflect the lyrics, and so the idea that you could start with music and then work backwards seems really bizarre to me, but it clearly works for people. I think Stephen Schwartz does it the other way around, and it's amazing to me.
Well, the advantage of your way, I think, Laurence, is that it's presumably, and when I say the word easier, I mean it within the context of your professionalism, not my generalism, to make the cadence of speech work, because we've all heard songs where there's a fantastic melody and the lyrics are perfectly adequate, but they put the emphasis on all the wrong places, or in all the wrong places, and you think, well, no one actually speaks like that. Now, you don't have to. There is license in a song, of course, to phrase in a slightly different way, but sometimes it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I agree, and I always try and make the melodies sound like natural cadences of speech. In fact, there's a song later on in Anne and Mary where the lyrics that we've actually used, are in this instance exactly what Lindsay wrote as a guide, and I just thought, this doesn't want to be turned into verse. This is working perfectly well as it is. So I have set it to music, but they are not rhyming, scanning lines.
But they don't need to be, do they?
Well, a song should have an emotional build to it. Just like, so if you're writing a monologue for a character, you wouldn't want to stick the sort of exciting bits at the beginning and then the rest of it kind of peters out or something. It's like a mini world in itself. You've got to have some kind of build. There's got to be a point to it. There's got to be a reveal at some point. If it's an emotional reveal of a character. So, and in the same way, that mirrors the emotional arc of a song, generally speaking. So I think if you're collaborating in that way and you're making sure that they match up, essentially. So yeah, so I think when I'm writing the prose version, the kind of like guide, I am keeping in mind the natural not rhythms, but the sort of emotional flow of a song.
You see, I find this all very interesting because several things have come into my mind at once. I'm thinking that, when you talk about having a sort of, not a dummy lyric, but a guide text, if you like. One of the most famous songs that did that, I don't think it has much of an emotional journey, but the song Tea for Two, which can't be denied as an evergreen. But the lyricist there famously knocked up a quick lyric to match the in this case the melody which had been written first, with a view of just understanding where the AB rhyme scheme was. So he did it sort of literally in 10 minutes, and then suddenly he realised what he'd written was exactly what the lyric needed to be, and of course Tea for Two is still remembered to this day. So you can sometimes stumble upon gold from a guide, but I accept your point, I think, Lindsay, as well, actually, that with a more sophisticated song where you're telling a story, whether it be the emotional, illustrating the emotion, or actually pushing the narrative on, or a bit of both, and in whatever mixture you're pushing it and creating it, then actually it's also interesting that your text in the first place can either be the text that needs to go in, or can then be converted into a lyric which is a bit more traditionally rhyming. And I'm just going to finish once again. I've said this in another episode on Musical Talk, but 2 or 3 years ago, there was a musical which had one thing which I particularly liked in it. Somebody had decided to set Elizabeth I's speech at Tilbury, which is, I may have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the stomach and whatever it is of a man or a king. A king, I think it is. But they set that to music, and it was actually incredible, and it was interesting to hear the potency of that speech, 500 years later, for goodness sake, come to life again with an appropriate musical setting.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
because I don't know how these things are supposed to be done. I think that what I bring to the collaboration is a certain degree of ignorance about it.
Oh, well, in which case can I join? Because I've got lots of that.
And it means that I guess to a certain extent we might be doing things in a non-traditional manner. Because I'm going, here's something for you to convert into a song.
I think it works quite well, because probably there's an instinct if you know too much what you're doing to kind of go, oh no, that won't work. You can't do that. That's not possible. But if you don't know what is and isn't possible, then maybe, I don't know, maybe you might surprise yourself, I suppose.
Well, it's revealed knowledge, isn't it? I mean, in most forms of our lives, I think most people will reject the idea that I'm telling you this, and you're expected to take it at face value and not question it. And the same must be true for creativity. Of course, there are rules, as it were, but I'm putting big speech marks around that. But those rules are often truisms. They're general guides. They shouldn't ever be given the sort of the status of gospel, it seems to me. So I don't think there's you say ignorance and you don't know what you're doing, but I think what you're actually saying is that it's important for you to find your own path. And if in finding your own path you're able to create something good, and you have on many occasions, you've got nothing to prove, then actually what you're doing is as good as anybody else's or as wrong as anyone else's. There is no one method. No, but there is no one method.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had this conversation with lots of composers over the years when people say, well, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that, so I went ahead and did it. And the reason I go and speak to them is because the show is good. So I don't have too much truck with the idea that well, I mean, let's go for one of the biggest names. The people who sneered in the mid-1930s when Gershwin wrote Porgy and Bess because he didn't do it in the way that a true opera writer would. I think none of them are here today, but, the humble pie is going to be landing on their plates and not on Gershwin's.
People love to tell you the way that you're supposed to do it, I think, don't they?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I mean, look at Twitter. It's just a load of people shouting at other people about what they should be doing.
Well, I've even got personal experience because, the very first... I used to write pantomimes with an original score with Tim Sayward of his parish, actually, on Musical Talk. And the very first one we did was a pantomime version of Dracula. It was called Dracula the Vampire Strikes Back, ho ho. Although it's been a very popular pantomime, and I'm very delighted. But we were rejected the first time we proposed it and put it up because people said, "Well, you can't possibly have a pantomime where the villain's name is the name of the show," and that was enough to reject the script.
What?
So we went elsewhere.
I think it's always underestimating audiences as well, because I think audiences would be like, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Oh, I know who Dracula is. It sounds fun."
I like the idea that audiences would go, "Oh no, I don't like him. Oh, he's horrible.
He's a bad man.
Oh, he's awful. I'm not going to go and see him.
It'll ruin Christmas."
I'd only want to see a Dracula musical if Dracula had a bit part. It's really got to be about someone else.
Yeah, Mina Harker, the musical.
So, Mockery Manor. Now, thank you so much for talking about the nuts and bolts of the creativity of it. And, of course, it was so very well received. And you had Anna Mary, I think, in your sort of bag of possibilities already waiting. When did you decide that there were more podcasts with songs to come? And when did you pick up Anna Mary? Had Mockery Manor finished? Or had this extra space that you were talking about, not going to Edinburgh, and then presumably the beginnings of the COVID period, did that allow you to pick up the show in parallel, and did you have other things on the go?
We came up with Anne and Mary in April 2020, I believe. And Mockery Manor finished in August 2020. But I think I wrote the first episode, and then we put it aside for a while. In order to finish Mockery Manor. And of course, with the pandemic, that sort of made us have to rethink what we were doing and everything.
And how you were doing it, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although we did have to remote record the last bit of Mockery Manor, so that kind of gave us a sense that we could do it.
Yes, I think
we underestimated how hard it was going to be.
Yeah, I think Mockery Manor had a smaller cast, and obviously that cast were not singing, and it's just a sort of slightly less complicated beast than Anna Mary is, and it's really pushed us to our absolute limits of what we feel we can do with remote recording Anna Mary. I don't think
we can't wait to get back in the studio with people.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to be so lovely. Yeah,
but isn't it good to know that you can do it this way? Or you can mostly have people in the studio, but the person you want lives in Vancouver or something. You could still do that in the future.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of our cast, Christina Bianco, is in New York, and it was really no different to the cast that we were recording in Norwich down the road in terms of the process. It's just we had to just keep slightly different hours, and that's it.
So what I'd like to do then, Laurence and Lindsay, is you've very clearly explained how you've sort of moved forward with your creativity, and Mockery Manor was the first flowering of your audio investigations, if you like. But, of course, what's available now is the Ballad of Anna Mary. And what I'd really like to do then is talk to you next week, if I may, about that piece, because I've listened to its first episode and now I'm agog to hear the remaining 4. I'm slightly also disappointed to learn there's only 4. But we'll talk, I'm sure, about how one tailors what you have to the episode count and how long they are. There's lots of ways of cutting cakes next time. So for the moment, Laurence, Lindsay, thank you so much for telling me about what you've been doing for the last 18 or so months.
Oh, pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
a sweet rendezvous. And in that memory I'm dreaming and loving you. Are you a memory, or are you a dream? And though that memory may be imprecise, dreaming of you is to dream of a paradise. Are you a memory, or are you a dream? You're in my dreams as clear as the moon in the sky. But my memory seems to be hazy and grey, like the clouds passing by. And though that memory may not be true, I'll stay in dreamland and dream that I'm loving you. Are you a memory, or are you a dream?
Musical talk. And there we are, another song from Mockery Manor, the wonderful mystery podcast with songs that Lindsay and Laurence have written and produced. Remember, Mockery Manor is completely free and you can find it online. And that's also true of the Ballad of Anne and Mary. The first episode has already been released and further episodes will be published over the course of the month of May 2021. And they are all free, so there's absolutely nothing stopping you enjoying brand new musical drama. And if you want to find out where you can find these episodes, just go along to the website longcatmedia.com and you can download all those podcast episodes on any standard podcast provider. Probably the place where you listen to musical talk, in fact. I do hope you've enjoyed this week's episode where we were looking at the development of the Ballad of Anne and Mary, their latest enterprise. Join me again next week where we'll be taking a much more in-depth look at that first episode of the Ballad of Anne and Mary with a particular focus on the storytelling, on the narrative. And hopefully you'll have had a chance to listen to that first or even more episodes as they are released so that you know what I'm talking about. I can guarantee you'll enjoy it. I certainly have. And don't forget there's still a chance to see I Wish My Life Were Like a Musical, which we discussed recently here on Musical Talk, which was another great smash hit Edinburgh Festival Fringe show, now streaming as a video production and specially filmed to be part of the Plays on Film series being run by the King's Head Theatre. That's available until the 12th of May, and to find out more about that, go to kingsheadtheatre.com. But for the moment, that's the end of this episode of Musical Talk, so thank you so much for joining me, and I jolly well hope that you'll tune in again next time. And to signify that this episode has come to some kind of shuddering end, I'm going to say that word which encapsulates the termination of my incessant twittering. And that, of course, is goodbye. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2021. Except for the songs, where the copyright remains with Laurence Owen and Lindsay Sharman. And my thanks to them both for allowing me to play their songs in this episode. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Musical Talk Thos.
Great.
Can we just take... I'm just going to... Our cat is making a fuss. I'm just going to tell her to go away.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to spend 3 minutes opening the door because a parcel has been left there because I heard the bell go. Shall we reconvene in 3 seconds? Is that correct?
Lovely.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
No, not
Thank you.
No. Go on, go away. Good girl.
Here you go, Thos. There's a little insight into us, how we communicate with our cats for when you come to edit this. There you go.
I'm back, by the way.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Oh, jolly good. Cat sorted?
Yes,
Yep.
she's gone away.
She's gone away. All she needs.
Long cat, is she?
She's quite long. If you hold her up, she dangles very long. So and she loves it.
There's a sentence to take out of context.
Yeah, it's about me. Yeah, that was Boomer who who is in Mockery Manor and the Ballad of Anne and Mary, because she's very vocal. So you waggle her around in front of a microphone and she makes a lot of noise.
Yeah, the other one just croaks.
Like a bagpipe.
Yeah. She's brilliant. Boomer's brilliantly operatic. She'll go "Wah," like that.
And you can play her, can't you? Because there's certain positions that you put her in where you know she's going to make a sound. Like if you pretend to almost put her down and then lift her up again, she'll make it.
Yeah.
So then if you do that, you can make a tune out of it.
A swaddy whistle cat.
Pretty much, yeah. The other one's useless. He doesn't make any noise at all, and if he does, it's just this sort of like this little croak.
Yeah.
Oh, an extra.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
He hasn't got the gift, unfortunately. But